Zeidon Alkinani is a geopolitical analyst and writer. He specializes in geopolitics and identity politics with a primary focus on Iraq and the Middle East. He's joining us now from Doha. Zeidon, what are your thoughts on that? Because, the optics certainly weren't good, were they, Zeidon? You had Esper saying, okay, these forces are going into Iraq. They went into Iraq. We saw the images of that. And then we had an Iraqi military official, I believe it was, saying, and even Adil Abdul Mahdi saying, these forces cannot stay.
Of course, Waqar. It's contradicting statements from both sides, even contradicting statements within the Iraqi military or the Iraqi state in itself. Politics never taught us that there will never be contradicting statements. In fact, politicians themselves act in contradiction to their very own statements. Trump's decision in withdrawing U.S. troops from Syria and leaving his former Kurdish allies to face the Turkish army and his suspicious return to Iraq are two actions that cannot be easily analyzed. Most analysts will also hardly believe that the U.S. army is getting closer to Iraq to protect it from the ISIS resurgence that it claimed, especially when the statements are contradicting between both countries. But I think the three main possible scenarios that could happen out of this is that either the U.S. wants to maintain a foot near Syria, Iraq in this case, now that it left most of Syria to Turkey and Russia in a very fast, hurried decision, or the U.S. is aware of the anger and the youth-led uprisings on the Iraqi streets today. The protests in Iraq are returning tomorrow, October 25th, after giving the government a chance of a few weeks to resign. And this could result, obviously, into a major transformative change in the Iraqi system and politics. And the U.S. probably wants to ensure a stronger presence during such a possible transition. Or finally, the U.S. might be challenging the Iranian militias in Iraq by wanting to rebalance its military influence with Iran in Iraq, since it left a militarily vulnerable Iraq for years for Iran to establish itself as a unilateral, aggressive, and influential player in Iraqi domestic affairs.
The fight against ISIS continues, and that's been something that's been rhetorically repeated a number of times by many U.S. officials. Then, of course, we've also had, Donald Trump, again, just using rhetoric, saying that he doesn't want to stay in long, blood-stained sands. And he was referring, of course, there to Syria, but I imagine you could stretch that to all of the Middle East, really, when he was speaking about that. But that's not really true, though, is it? I mean, he very much would want to stay in the Middle East.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, Waqar. I don't think taking Donald Trump's word would be a strategic way of trying to analyzing what's going on in the region, even if we were to analyze his very own policies. The U.S. troops coming back to Iraq means one of the two things. It either means that things are really bad and they're coming for something to do the opposite because that bad thing is not really working out for them, or it means that they're going to do something bad, which they did in 2003 when they invaded the country. Having the U.S. military return to Iraq never gave us a good indicator. It was never a good sign. The bad signs now would be that there's something that might happen, as our colleague mentioned. There's something that might be happening that we don't know about, which is why the U.S. Army wants to be in the picture. Or there is something that the U.S. wants to do in Iraq.